All right, so we're going to start on our first website project. Now, this is a website for selling an ebook, and in this case, it's a ebook on how to start blogging. But of course, you could change it for whatever you want. And I just called it Blog Mastery. And basically, we have a nav bar at the top with a home and details link, and then a contact button, which is also a link that goes to an inner page, which I'll show you in a second. And then we have this header/hero area with an image, some text, and then this email address form here. All right, and then this background image as well. Now, when I scroll down, you'll notice that the nav bar turns into, it has this background color. It's still translucent, you can see through it, but if we don't have this, it's not going to be very readable, especially if you're over more text. So we're going to implement a little bit of JavaScript to say when we scroll down a little bit, then add this styling to it. It has a background color. It also has a little bit of shadow. And when we scroll back up, it disappears. So we're going to do that on pretty much all of the projects, except for the portfolio, because there's actually not a nav bar on that website. All right, now we also have an SVG that we're going to use to give it this effect right here, this wave effect, which looks pretty nice. And then this section here is going to be just three content blocks with some icons, some colored icons, and some text. Then we have this section here, which has an image and then some text over here. And if I click the Get Your Copy Now, it opens up a modal, which looks pretty nice. It's pretty much the same exact content, but the content doesn't really matter. I did want to make it real words instead of just using lorem ipsum, but the content it really doesn't matter. But a nice looking modal, we can close it up, scroll down a little bit. We have this area here with the background and the rounded corners. Then we have this here. This will open another modal, and then some testimonial areas. This part here, get your free ebook now. We're going to use a little bit of negative margin to bring this image outside of its section. And this section also has another background image. Then at the bottom, we have this social media area and then a simple footer. Okay, and then if I click on contact, it takes me to another page which has a header with this SVG wave, and then a contact form, and then down here just a very simple map. Okay, and the social media footer. And what I'm going to do with this project is at the end we're going to deploy it to a hosting service called Vercel, and we're going to use a service called FormSpree to make this contact form work, because I know that a lot of courses like this will show you how to build a website with HTML, CSS, etc., but they won't show you how to actually put it on the internet and make the forms work. So we're going to do that, and it'll probably be just for this project because you can take that information and then you can use it on the other projects as well. All right, and then the details, we'll just scroll down to this area here. If you click home, it'll just take you back up. And then on mobile devices, so if we use the device toolbar here, everything works and is just going to be stacked. So as you can see, anything that was in a column is now just in a one column stack. Okay, so that's it. In the next video, we're going to set up the starter. We're going to change a couple variables because obviously some stuff has changed. This is now the primary color. We have some font sizes to mess with and stuff like that. So we'll get to that in the next video. All right, guys, so we're going to start on our ebook website, and in this particular video, you'll have a download for the ebook website starter. It'll be a zip file, so you just want to unzip that, and then what I'm going to do is take that starter and paste it on my desktop, and then rename it from ebook website starter to just ebook website, and then we're going to open that with VS Code. Now, what this is it's the starter that we created in the last section with just a couple things added to it, including the images folder, which has all the images for the website, including the favicon. And then in the index.html, I included the favicon here, and I also brought in the font that I want to use from Google Fonts, which is Open Sans. All right, everything else is the exact same. We have our script.js, which is completely empty. That's just for any custom JavaScript. We have all of our Sass files. Once we run our Sass build or Sass watch, it'll create the CSS folder. And then one other thing I did is in the Bootstrap SCSS, I added the font family variable. So this variable is what will set the entire website font. And as you can see, I set it to Open Sans, and I already brought that in with Google Fonts. All right, so yeah, anything else is the exact same from what we created. Now, the first thing we need to do is run npm install, because in our package.json, we have these 3 dependencies, but we don't have a node modules folder. So that means they haven't been installed in our environment. So let's go ahead and do that. You can run npm install or npm I. Either one will work. And you can see it created a node modules folder. Now what we want to do is run our Sass watch so that we can continue to work on the site, and we can edit our Sass files, and they'll just compile, whenever we save. So let's do npm run sass:watch. So now it's watching our Sass, and it compiled it to the CSS folder, and that's what's being included in the index.html. So now we can just open up the index.html and we can run it with live server. And you don't have to use live server. If you want to just open the file, that's okay too. But it's better to do this because every change we make, it'll automatically update or refresh. All right, now we're going to have some other variables in our Bootstrap SCSS file. I don't want to put all of them here now because we can't really tell because there's nothing here yet. So we'll add most of them as we go along, but I do want to add the colors that we're going to use. So that's one of the first things that we'll do when we start a project. And remember, you can use the variables like primary, secondary, success, all that stuff. You can change those default colors just by adding these variables. So for the primary color, it's going to be this this purple. Okay, you can see we use it here, here on the bullet points, on the buttons. That'll be the primary, and the secondary is going to be this light blue. Okay, you might have thought that this blue here would be a primary color, but this is actually a background image, so we don't even really need that color. When we hover over these links here, you can see it's the secondary color, so we'll set that variable as well. So for primary, it's going to be the hex value of C167EF. So that'll give us that purple. Then we want to add secondary, and our secondary will be 10BCEE, which is that light blue. And then I'm also going to add a custom for dark. So that'll be, let's say, 2B3041. And it gives it kind of a bluish grayish tint. Where we use it is right here. So this will be that BG dark. And then the light will be this, which is like a grayish, has a little bit of gray in it. So let's say light, and we're going to set that to F3F, 6F9. So whenever we use BTN dark or BTN light, it will use these colors, or BG dark or BG light. Wherever we use any of these contexts, it'll now be these colors, because what happened is it compiled the Sass into the Bootstrap CSS, which now pertains to those colors. In fact, if I search for this right here in the compiled CSS, there it is. BS primary is now that color instead of that, the default blue that we know all too well. So I think that's all I want to add as far as variables go. The rest we'll add as we move along. So in the next video, we're going to start on this area, which is the navigation, the nav bar, and then the header, or the hero, whatever you want to call it. So in the last video, we got everything set up. We have Sass watch running. We added some variables for the main colors of the website. So now we're going to continue and we're going to build the navigation. And we're going to add some variables along with it because there are some things that I want to change, that I want to customize. So let's start off by just creating our nav bar, and a lot of these classes will be very familiar if you've followed along through the sandbox. So we'll get rid of this H1. And I just want to mention that most of this stuff is going to take a little longer in this project just because it's the first project. When we go on to our other ones, there'll be stuff we've already done, so we can do like I can copy and paste and things like that. But this project we're going to take nice and slow. All right, so I'm going to put a comment here. Let's say navigation. I like to just comment all the sections so we know exactly what's going on. We're going to use a nav tag with the class of navbar. And we want a class of navbar dash expand, and then I'm going to do LG. And what that does is it makes it so when we go under the large breakpoint, then it'll show the hamburger menu as opposed to just showing the links. You could change this to MD or XL or whatever you want. I prefer to use LG. And then I also want to fix it to the top, so we're going to use the class of fixed top, and I'm going to use the class of navbar-dark, which will make the text light. And I want it light because it's going to be on this background. And when we scroll down, ultimately, it'll have a dark background as well. Okay, so let's do that. And then inside here, we're going to have a container because I don't want the branding and the links to go right up against the side on really large screens. I want it contained. Then we'll have an A tag with navbar-brand, and that'll just go to index.html. And then in the A tag, we're going to have an image, and that's going to be an images/ and then logo PNG. And I'm going to give this logo a width of 225. Now, if I save that and we take a look, you can see this part of the logo, but the text is white, so we can't see it. Ultimately, it's going to be on this header background, but for now, what I'm going to do is just add a bg-dark class onto the navbar so we can actually see what we're doing. All right, so we have the logo. Now, underneath that is going to be the collapse button or the hamburger menu. So let's add a button. We'll give it a class of navbar toggler. And we're going to, in here, just have a span with the class of navbar-toggler-icon. That'll be the 3 lines. And we're just going to add a couple more attributes onto this button. Let's close that up. So the type will be button. We're going to have a data BS toggle, which is going to be collapse, because that's the effect that it uses. And then data-BS-target. And that's going to be the ID of the menu that we want to open. So for that, we'll do a number sign and then navbar nav drop down. All right, so that's what we should have so far. And we should be able to see it on lower than large screens. So once I go past that large, now we can see the button. It doesn't do anything because we don't have the menu yet, but we can see it. All right, so now for the menu, that's going to go, let's go under this button here. We're going to have a div of collapse and navbar-collapse, which adds some extra styles, and then an ID of navbar nav dropdown. Okay, and you just want to make sure that this target ID is the same as this ID. Then we have our UL with navbar nav. And actually, I also want to have the UL on the right instead of right next to the logo. So I'm also going to add MS Auto, which will put the margin at the start. So MS is margin start. And then in here we'll have an LI. All these LIs are going to have a nav-item class. And then we'll have our links with a nav-link class. I'm also going to make the font weight semi-bold on these. So we just want to add that class as well. And let's see, this is going to be the home, so it'll go to index.html. Oops. And we'll say home. And then let's copy this LI down. And the next one is going to go to, let's say, number sign details. And for the text, that'll be details. And then the last li is going to be the button. So if we look at our final version here, it's going to be this button. So we need to style that a little bit differently. So the li is still going to have nav item. And then the a tag, we're just going to add a few extra classes. We do want our nav link, but we also want btn, and then btn outline dash light. And let's also do our semi-bold. So font weight semi-bold, and some padding on the x-axis and some margin on the x-axis. Okay, and that's going to go to contact.html, and we're going to put our text inside the a tag of contact. Okay, so if I save it, this is what it's going to look like. Now this looks much different than this. This has more space. This has a rounded button. It has white links instead of like gray. And then when we hover, it has the light blue. This doesn't. So I want to change some of that stuff. And instead of just adding a bunch more classes, we're just going to overwrite certain variables. So I'm going to go into my Bootstrap SCSS, because that's where you want to change any variables. And under colors, I'm going to add, let's say, navbar. And I want to add extra spacing on the top and bottom. Now, if we go to Node Modules and then Bootstrap and then SCSS, and then we look at the variables file, there's tons and tons of classes here. So it can be a little frustrating at first when you're trying to find the right variable that you need to do what you want. The one that we want in this case is going to be navbar-padding -y, right? Because we're talking about the top and bottom. By default, it takes the spacer value and multiplies that by 0.5. So in this case, I believe it comes out to be 0.5 rem. So what I want to do is change this variable to 1 rem. So I'm going to copy it. You never want to change it in here. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go here, paste it in, change it to 1 rem, save, and I'm watching my SAS so it gets compiled, and now it adds a little bit more padding. All right. Now the next thing I want is for the text to be white. So the variable for that is going to be navbar-dark-color, and we're going to set that to FFF, which is pure white. And there we go. So now we got white. Now when I hover over it, I want it to be that light blue, and that light blue is our secondary. So what I'm going to do is add the variable navbar-dark-color hover, and I'm going to set that to the secondary variable. So now it compiles. I come over here, and let's see, did it compile? Is that the right one? Navbar, I'm sorry, it's navbar-dark hover color, not color hover. So hover color, save it, and there we go. So now we have the light blue. Now while we're at it, let's do the button styles, the default button styles, and there's a lot of variables that pertain to buttons. What I recommend if you're looking for a variable is type, whatever it is you're looking for, such as button, and just kind of go through. You can see this isn't what we want, form file button, so we can skip all those. Yeah, it looks like right here we have buttons, and it's documented pretty well. There's a lot of comments. So what I want to change is the radius, first of all. So if we look down here, we have button border radius, but there's a variable for each size, right? Small, large, and regular. And I want them all to be the same. So what I'll do is grab, well, let's just take this, and we're going to go to our file, and let's say buttons. And I'm going to say button border radius, but I also want radius for small buttons and radius for large buttons. So instead of putting, and I want it to be 50 pixels for all of them, but instead of putting 50 pixels in all of those, what I'll do is create my own variable of button dash radius, set that to 50 pixels, And then we can just add this variable to all of these. So that way, if I want to change it, I need semicolons here. If I want to change it, I can change it in this one place, you know, instead of changing it in 3 places. So let's go ahead and take a look, and now the button is much more rounded. So all buttons, any button I create now is going to look like that. Unless, of course, I add classes to change it. This is the default. Now, as far as the padding in the button goes, I want to set the X padding to 30 pixels and the Y to 10 pixels. And just like with radiuses, if we look at, let's see, if we look at the padding, we have button padding Y and button padding X, but we also have it for small and for large as well. So what I'm going to do is let's set up here, we'll say button dash radius, not radius, what am I doing? Padding dash X, and I'm going to set that to 30 pixels, and then we'll have Y set to 10 pixels. And then down here, let's do button, yeah, it's BTN. So BTN dash padding dash X is going to be set to my button padding X, because this is just a custom variable. The actual Bootstrap ones are BTN. So I'm setting this, and then I'm setting this button padding X to my button padding X. And we'll do the same with Y. And then we're going to have to do the same with the other sizes. So I'll copy that down twice, and this one is going to be X-M or X-SM, and then X-LG, and then we'll do the same here with Y-SM and Y-LG. All right, so I'll save that. Now, we're not really going to see a difference here because I set a class on this for the padding. Now, one thing to note is that when I make this smaller, you can see that that button radius is now applied to the hamburger menu, which I don't like. However, there's actually a variable for that specific thing. So I'm going to come over here and let's say navbar dash toggler, which is the hamburger menu, and then border dash radius, and I'll set that back to 5 pixels, save, compile, and now that's back, okay? But all the other buttons are going to have that rounded by default, but the navbar toggler isn't. And you could put it up here with the navbar stuff if you want, but since it relates to buttons, I'm just going to keep it there. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do is when I hover over the contact, I want that text to be dark. And I couldn't find a variable to actually do that, so I'm going to just add some custom CSS, and this is the first time that we've had to do this. So if we go into Sass, you never want to go into your CSS. So style.scss, I'm going to add, let's say navbar, the navbar class, and then the btn dash outline dash light, which is what that button is, hover. I want the color to be 333. In fact, you know what? I could use a Bootstrap variable here. I could say var, just to show you we can do this as well. So I could say bs dash dark. I believe that should do it. So let's come over here, hover, and now you can see it's no longer blue, it has the dark. Okay, and we'll be adding some custom CSS throughout all these projects, but not much. Most of the stuff is available within Bootstrap classes or within a variable. All right, so that's it for the navbar. I mean, ultimately, we're not going to have the BG dark. We're going to have the, it's going to be transparent, but we won't be able to see it yet, so I just made it dark for now. In the next video, we're going to start on the header/hero area. Okay, so we're going to start on the header area, but before we do that, I want to talk about another set of variables that I want to create, that I want to customize. So we know that we can use margin padding, so we can say, for instance, MT-2, MT dash all the way up to 5, which is, I think it's 3 rem. Now we can change that, we can change those values, but we can also add on to it. And that's what I want to do, because I want to be able to say, padding top 7. That's actually one of the classes that I want to use. And that 7 will be equal to 8 rems instead of the maximum of 5, which is 3 rems. Now the way we do that, if we look at our variables here and we search for spacers, because that's what these are, spacers, you'll see right here we have spacers and 0 through 5. So this is how we get those values, those M-5, P-5, or 0 through 5, whatever. Now, each of these takes the original spacer, which is 1 rem, and multiplies that by a certain number. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab all of this and copy it, and then I'm going to bring it into my Bootstrap SCSS, and we'll put a variable, comment here. It says spacers, and then I'm going to paste that in. And what I'm going to do is not change any of these values, but add to it. So I'm going to add 6, and then we can say spacer, and we're going to take spacer and we're going to multiply it by 6. We just copy these down. And then let's do 7, and we'll say spacer. That will be times 8. And then we'll do 8. So 8 will be the maximum, and that will be spacer times 12. All right, so just by doing that and saving it and recompiling into the Bootstrap CSS, I can now do MT-8, and it will be a lot more margin than the maximum of 5 if you're using just the default Bootstrap CSS. All right, so I hope that makes sense. Now we'll close that up for now. I'm going to keep the variables. We'll just close that up for now. And let's start on the header. So we're going to go right under the nav here. And I'm going to use, actually put a comment here, say header. And I'm going to use an HTML5 header tag for this. And I'm going to give it a class of header, because there are a couple custom things I want to do. And then I'll say hero, because that's basically what this is a hero in the header. And I'll give that a class of hero. And I want the text to be white, so I'm going to use text white. And here I'm actually going to use PT-7, and I can only do that because of that customization that I made. By default, PT-7 is not, it's nothing, it won't work. But we added that to the spacers. Now I want to use a container in here, but I'm actually going to use container-XL, because I want this to be 100%, this container, until it's on, around here, smaller screens. And the reason for that is because the way this is formatted, if this is thinner, like if the container is here and here, this looks really weird because the text gets really squished. So I think container XL looks better. It stays 100% until I hit about here. All right, so let's do that, container XL, and you can experiment if you want. And in the container, we're going to use the Bootstrap grid column. So we'll have a row here, and we're going to split it right down the middle. So call MD6 using MD so that it stacks on smaller screens. And this is going to be the image, and I'm actually going to put it in a class called image-container. And on that, I'm also going to add a margin bottom 5 and padding on the x-axis 4. And then we put the image in here. It's going to have a class of img-fluid, which will make it 100% of its container. And the image itself is going to be images/ and then header-ebook. So let's go ahead and save that and take a look. There we have our main image. And we're not going to really be able to see the text until we add the background, but we'll go ahead and add that now. So under call MD6, we're going to add another call MD6. So this is the text. And this is going to have a class of, I'm going to call text container. And let's do some padding here. So P4. I'm going to make this a flex box because basically I want to make this a flex box, but it's going to be a flex column, meaning it goes vertical, not in a row. And I'm doing that so that I can align it in the middle vertically. See how there's space up here and space on the bottom? It's aligned because we're going to use justify content center. Now, we're displaying it as flex, but like I said, I want it to be a column, so we're going to add the class of flex column, and then we're going to add justify content dash center. And then I want to make this 100% height, so I'm going to do H100 and then just add some margin to the bottom. So in the text container, I'll have an H1. I'm actually going to use one of the display classes. I'm going to use display 3 and make the font weight bold. And we're going to say welcome to blog mastery. And then under that H1, we're going to have a paragraph. I'm going to give it a class of lead, which just makes it a little bigger. And for the text for these projects, I'm just going to paste it in. If you want to open the final version and grab the text, you can, or you can just use lorem content. You know, you could just do lorem 40 enter or something like that. It's up to you. So that's the paragraph. Now under that, we're going to have this form. So let's go directly under the paragraph. I'm just going to put a comment here for form, and we'll put it in a class, a div with the class of form container, and then a class of text dash center. Okay, and then we'll add our form. We don't need an action. Get rid of that. And in the form, we're going to have a class of my4, so margin on the top and bottom, and we'll have our input, which is going to have a class of form dash control, and then a class of form dash control dash LG to make it a little bigger. And then I want it really rounded, so I'm going to use rounded 5, and it'll be an email type. And let's add a placeholder. So placeholder will be email address. And then underneath that my5 div, my4 div, I want a block button, so I'm going to put it in the class of dgrid. And then we'll have a button. Let's give it a class of btn and btn-primary, and let's make the text white. Okay, and we'll say free download. So let's save that. Let's take a look. All right. So obviously we need to do the background image, but notice the button here is purple because I did button primary, and we changed the variable of primary to this purple. And also it's rounded by default. I didn't add any special rounded classes. It's because we customized the final Bootstrap CSS file by editing the Sass. So now we want to do the background image. So we're going to hop into the styles.scss. Remember, you always want to be in your Sass, not in your CSS. And then let's add, let's say header. And then for the background, we'll say URL. And the image is going to be .. so up one level in images, and then we want the header-background.jpg, and I'm going to position it to be center, and no repeat. And yeah, and then we want to add a background size of cover. And there we go. So now we have our background image. So we can remove the BG dark now on the navigation. So up here we have BG dark. Let's get rid of that. Unless you want to keep it, if you think that looks better, that's fine. But I like the look of it being transparent, and then it'll kick in later on. We'll do that. So when we scroll, it'll have a dark background. Okay, so let's see. We want the bottom of this to not be just a straight line, but to be that wave. So we're going to add an SVG, and the SVG you can just copy from the final version, from the GitHub repo or wherever you get it from if you download it from the course. And we're going to put that down. Let's see. So we're going to go right under the header here. Actually, we want to go inside the header. So right here, I'm just going to paste in that SVG. So it looks like this. So paste that in, and then it will see this wave effect. Now there's a couple other things that I want to add, because if you look at our version here and you look at the final version, there's a few differences. So one is the line height. So there's a higher line height here than there is here. So to change the base line height, we can go and just add one single variable of line height base, and I think the default is 1.5, but I'm going to make it 1.7. I tend to like a little bit more line height. All right, so that now you can see that matches the paragraph line height. Another thing that I did is added a little bit more spacing under the headings. So we can add a variable of headings dash margin dash bottom. And I'm going to set that to the spacer value, which is 1 rem. You can see that up top, times 1, and which will just be 1 rem. So we'll save that, and now there's a little more margin under the heading, so now it matches. And the last thing is just the size of the button. So I just forgot to add on the button, I wanted to add the large class. So right here where we have the free download button, let's add, I'll put it over here, btn-lg. And that will make it a little bigger, and now they're both the same exact, as you can see. So that's it. In the next video, we're going to start to work on the next section, which would be the icons. And we'll probably do the scrolling as well, because after we add the icon area, we'll be able to scroll a little more. So I want to add that effect where we make the navigation dark. Okay, so we're going to do the icon section, and I was going to do the nav scroll effect in the same video, but I think I'm just going to split them up just so we can have that in its own video. All right, now before we get to the icon section, there's one thing that I want to fix. Well, two small things. So when we get to about here, you can see that the image is not centered. On really small screens, it just automatically is, but right here, it's not. So what I'm going to do is add a media query and just push that over. Also, I want this text to be centered. So in the style.scss, we're just going to add a media query here. So let's say media and max width, we'll do 1,000 pixels. So anything under that, then we're going to take the hero class and the image container class that's in that. And then I'm going to display that as flex. And we're going to justify the content to the center. So if I save that, now the image is going to be right in the center. Okay, and then for the text, so for that we'll just say hero, and then we'll grab the text container, and then we're going to set text align to center. So I think that looks a little better. All right, so I just wanted to do that. Now we're going to add the icon section. So let's go to our index.html, and let's add, so right under the header, we're going to add icons. Now, if you've watched my Bootstrap 4 course, my Tailwind course, my HTML CSS course, when I create websites, I like to create sections. I usually have the header tag at the top, and then this is a section, this is a section, this, and they all have section tags. So that's what we're going to do here, is have a section tag. And I like to give it a custom class. Even if we're not going to style it, I like them to just have a descriptive custom class. So we're going to do icons, and then let's do BG light for the background, and then some padding bottom. And then the container is also going to be container XL, because I want it to be 100% until it's small screen. And then let's see, I'm sorry, not 100% until it's small screen, 100% until it's the largest it can go, which is I think 1400, and then it will stick there. So in here we're going to have a row, and we're going to have 3 columns, so that means we want col MD4 because each one takes up 4 of the 12 slices. And then I want to display them as flex, so basically right here I want each of these to be a flex box because I want to align the icon and the text as in a row alongside each other. Now I could just do col MD4 and then put another div inside with dflex, but instead I'm just going to use this same div and say dflex, and we're also going to want to just add, let's do gap dash 4. And then the first flex item will be the icon, so let's do FAS and FA dash user. And then with Font Awesome, we can make these bigger with, what is it? It's FA dash and then a number. We'll do 3x. And then I want the color to be purple, so I'm going to do text primary. Because since it's an icon, it's actually a font, so we're going to use text, not BG. So that'll give us the icon. Now I'll have a div with the H5, and the H5 I'm going to just add a font weight of bold, and I'll put the text in a minute. And then the paragraph I'm going to add a class of text dash muted. Now the text itself I'm just going to grab and paste in. And just to let you know what I did to create this text, I didn't think it up on my own. I basically put dummy text in first, and then I took the whole section, put it through ChatGPT, and said replace the dummy text with text that has to do with creating an ebook about a blog. And that's where this text came from. So ChatGPT is used for a lot of different things. I find it really helpful. So that looks like this, right? So now we have our icon and we have our text next to each other. The other two are going to be very similar, so I'm going to copy the col MD4, and we're going to go underneath that, paste it in, and then one more. So 3 all together. The second icon is going to be rocket, and I'm also going to change the color from text primary to text secondary. And then for the actual content, let me just grab that and replace this. Okay, and then for the last one, it's going to be FA dollar for the icon, and then I'm going to grab the text and paste that in, and there we go. So now we have 3 columns, and they should stack on top of each other. Now they are kind of close together. There's a few ways you could separate them. You could add a margin onto each one, or you could use the HStack class on the row and then add, let's say, G-4, and that will separate them a little bit. All right, so that's our icon section. So, like I said, in the next video, we want to take care of the nav bar because right here you can't read it, right? So we want to add a background, and we'll add some other styles as well. I want it to be a little bit transparent and to give it a shadow. All right, so now we're going to add the navbar effect so that when we scroll, it gets darker. All right, now we do have to add a little bit of JavaScript, but it's actually really, really simple. There's not much to it at all, and I'll just explain it as I'm going along. So we're going to open up the script.js, get rid of that, and we're going to create a function, and I'm just going to call it user scroll. You can call it whatever you want, and we're going to grab the navbar, so let's say const navbar, and I'll use the document object, and then let's use query selector. And we know the navbar has a class of navbar, so I'll get it by that. And then on the window, which is the global object in the browser, I'm going to add an event listener, and I want to listen for a scroll event. And when that happens, I'm going to run a function. And in that function, I want to check where the scroll is. So on the window object, there's a property called scroll Y, and that means scroll on the Y axis vertically. And we basically want to say if that value is above 50, which is probably around right here, if it's above 50, then I want to add the class of bgdark to that navbar. All right, so we can do that by saying navbar, which we just brought in, and then on the class list object there's a method called add, and we can add a class, and I'm going to add bg-dark. And then we'll have an else, because if it's not, then we want to remove that class. So all we have to do to remove it is say class list dot remove bg-dark. Now I want this to run when the DOM is loaded, the document object model. So we can do that by saying document and then add an event listener. And we want to listen for DOM content loaded. And when it's loaded, then use scroll will be executed. All right, so now if I go up here and I slowly scroll down, oh, it's actually right about here, and you can change that if you want. Like if you wanted to change it to oh, I didn't put 50. That's why it was so quick. So it should be greater than 50. So if you want it to do it right away, like as soon as you scroll, you can just say if window scroll Y, but I want it to scroll a little bit until we get to about here. Okay, that's 50. Now, one other thing I want to do is or two other things. I want to have this to be a little transparent so we can see through it a little bit, and also give it a little shadow. So I'm going to also add another class in addition to bg-dark, a custom class called navbar-sticky, or whatever you want. You can call it anything, but it's a sticky nav, so I just figured I'd call it that. And then in our style SCSS, let's add, let's see, we'll go right here, and let's say navbar-sticky, and I'm just going to add opacity 0.9, so it's just a little bit transparent. And then I'm also going to add a box shadow, and for that we'll do 0, 0 for the inset, 10 pixels, and then for the color we'll do RGBA 0, 0, 0, and then for the opacity 0.5. All right, so now in addition, whoa, what is going on here? Oh, this needs to be remove. All right, so now in addition to it being dark, we can see through it, and it's got a little bit of a shadow. Now the last thing is, instead of just flicking it in and out like that, I want it to have a transition. So to do that, we can just take our nav bar and just add transition, and I'll just transition all. You could take a specific CSS property, but we'll just say all. And let's do a 0.5 seconds. So basically it'll take a half a second to fade in or fade out. And we'll do ease in out for the effect. So now if I scroll down, you can see that it fades in, go up, it fades out, rather than just, turning on and off. So that's it. Pretty easy to add that effect. I think, yeah, pretty much all of our projects will have that, except for the portfolio, because there's not even a nav bar in that one. But yeah, it comes in handy. So you can use this in other projects as well. And that's it. Let's move on to the next section. All right, so now we're going to add the details area under the icons, and we're going to add a modal as well, which will have very similar content. So let's go under the icon section, and let's create, let's say, details. And there'll be two sections that are very similar to this. So this is the first one. And then let's add a section. I'm going to give it an ID of details because I want the menu to go to this area. And then also a class of details and a class of MY5. So margin on the top and bottom. We'll add just a regular container to this. And then let's add a row so we can add some columns. And we're going to do just two even columns. So col MD6. And the first column will be the text. So I'm going to add a class of text-container. And we'll make it a flex box, so deflex, but I want it to be a flex column because it's going to be vertical. And then justify the content to the center. And let's make it H100, so 100% of its container for the height. and then an H2 with the class of display-6. And we'll say unlock your blogging potential. And some of the content is repetitive. Like I said, I got it from ChatGPT. So paragraph, I'm just going to throw that text in there. And then underneath the paragraph, we're going to have a UL. This is going to be a list group. And we're going to use list group flush to take away the outside border. And let's, I'm also going to increase the line height with LH-LG, so large line height. And then each LI will have a class of list group item. So for this one, actually let's put the icon in. We're just going to have a square icon, so FAS-FA-square, and I'm going to make that the color of the primary, so text primary. And then underneath that, I'm going to add the text. And I just have a strong tag here, unleash your creativity, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm just going to paste in the other two LIs as well, which you can get from the final version. So if we save that, we take a look, that's what it's going to look like. So that's the left side, sorry. And there's going to be a link under that formatted as a button. So right under the UL, let's add an A tag with BTN primary. I'm also going to make the text white. And then let's do a margin top 4 to push it down a little bit. And we're going to align self to the start. Okay, so to the left. And this is going to open a modal, so it doesn't even need an href. What we're going to add in addition to a class, actually let's put the text in here first. So it's going to say get your copy now. And then in the A tag, we're going to add a couple attributes. So one is data-bs-toggle. So anything that toggles, like collapse or modal or anything, is going to have this attribute. And this particular value will be modal. Then we also want a target, so data-bs-target. And we're going to set that to the ID of modal1. So we got to make sure when we create this modal, we give it that ID. All right, so that's the left side. And then the right side will just be an image. So let's go under the call. So call MD6 ends here. So right under that, we'll do call MD6 again. And then I'm going to add a class of image container and give it a padding, so padding 5. And then in that, we'll have an image. We'll give it a class of image fluid. Oops. And the source of that is going to be in the images folder, and it's going to be the description.png. Okay, so there we go, and those should stack since it's call MD6. Cool. Now this is going to open up a modal, so we need to create that next. So let's go right under the section, and we'll say modal1. And this is going to have have an ID of modal1. Make sure we put that. And then a class of modal, a class of fade. And then inside that we'll have our dialog. So class of modal-dialog. And I'm going to make it larger. There is a class of modal LG. And then I want this to be pushed down from the top. So I'm actually going to use MT7. Because remember, we added those custom variables so that we can use 7. We can use up to 8. And then we have our modal-content, which is going to have some padding as well. And then we'll have a row. And let's do a call LG-6. And we'll have our image container. It's going to be the same image, so I'll just grab this. Let's see, so we have, let's give it a class. We'll have a div with the class of image container, and then we'll have that image. All right, then the end of the column is right here. So let's do another call LG-6. And this will have a text dash container. And I think it's going to be the same exact stuff that we did up here. So yeah, let's just copy the H2, the paragraph, and the UL. And we'll put that in here. And then under the UL, I'm going to have an A tag with BTN and BTN primary, and also text white. Okay, and the text for this is just going to be free download. And then next to that, we're going to have a close button that will dismiss the modal. So let's say button and give it a class of BTN and BTN Lite. And we'll say close, and then we're going to give it an attribute of data-bs-dismiss and set that to modal. All right, so now let's try it out. We're going to click on Get Your Copy Now. Now, even though we used modal LG, it's still not wide enough. I want it to be a little wider, so this is where custom styles come in. So we're going to come in here and just add to the modal dash dialog, and I'm going to give it a max width of 1040 pixels. So that way the modal will be just a little wider. So if I click it, there we go. So that looks pretty good. And we can click close. And now we're going to do the statement and the second details section. So the statement is this, very simple. And then second details is very similar to the first one. So let's go back to index.html and go under, did I make that a div? No, that's the modal. Okay, so we want to go under that modal. And this is going to be the statement, and that will be section, give it a class of statement, and then margin bottom 5. I'm going to put it in a container, and then a row. So you can see the pattern of creating a section. And then this is just how I do it. There's plenty of other ways to do it, but I like to just break it into sections, add a container, and then add the grid, the row. In this case, we're using Bootstrap, so I'll use the Bootstrap grid system. If we weren't, then I'd just use Flexbox or CSS grid. So I'm going to make this a full column, so call 12. That'll just make it all the way across. And then we'll add a text dash container, and let's do a BG dash light and padding 5 and rounded dash 5. And then we're just going to have an H2 and a paragraph, which I'm going to just paste in. Okay, so you guys can get that, or you can just put your dummy content in. And that's it for the statement, very simple. Now the second detail section is very similar to the first. So let's come down here, we'll say details 2, and let's say section. I'm still going to use the details class here, and then we're going to do my5. We'll add our container, we'll add our row, and our call dash. Let's do, did I do LG6? I think I wanted to do, let's see, that one I think, yeah, that's medium. Let's do LG6 for the details. So up here, let's make this, instead of medium, we'll do LG, and then here, LG as well. All right, so back down to the details 2. In the first column, we're going to have the image container. So now the image is going to be on the left. The first one was on the right. And let's do P5, padding 5, and then image. We'll give it a class of image-fluid, and the image is going to be in the images folder, and it's going to be author.img. author.png. So it should look like that. All right, now for the text, let's go under the call LG6 and add another one, call LG6. And we'll have our text dash. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to copy the text container from the first details because it's the same thing basically. So this div of text container, which ends right here, I'm going to grab that and come back down here to details 2 inside the column. And okay, now I'm just going to change the text up a little bit. So instead of unlock your blogging potential, let's say craft, what is it? Craft remarkable content. And then for the paragraph, I'm just going to swap that out. And if you want to keep the same text, that's fine. Let's make that a little bit shorter. All right, and then for the list items, we'll do that. And then for this, we're going to say learn more for the text. And it's going to open another modal, but it's going to be modal 2. So you want to make sure you change that to 2. All right. So now let's create the other modal, and we can just copy the first one. So this is the first modal. And we'll go under details 2. Paste that in, and let's change that to modal 2. Change the ID to modal 2. And let's see, the image, we're going to change to author. And then the text, I'm just going to paste in all the new text. So the H2, paragraph, and the UL. It's all formatted the exact same, it's just different text. That a little bit small, a little shorter. All right, so now let's click on the Learn More, and we get our modal. All right, cool. So what we'll do in the next video is the testimonials, and then we'll do this bottom part here. We have this image kind of coming out of the section a little bit, so we'll move on to that part next. Okay, so now we're going to start on our testimonials and basically the footer. So if we go to the final version here, we want to add these 3 testimonials with the pictures, and then this area with this email form, the image with a negative margin, so it comes out of the section, background image, and then this social media area and the footer down here. All right, so let's start at the bottom of the file under the last detail section we did. And this is going to be testimonials. And it's there's going to be 3 columns, but first we want to wrap it in a section. Let's say testimonials. And I'm also going to give it a class of MB-8. So because I want a lot of space below it, because we're going to have, this area. So it's a pretty big space. So in that section, let's create a container. And then in the container, we'll have our row. There's going to be 3 testimonials. So we're going to do call MD4 for that. I also want to just align the text to the center. And in the column, we're going to have an image with a class of rounded-circle. And then I'm going to add some margin bottom to the image. And the image itself is going to be an images / and actually, you know what? For this, we're going to use the random images API. I'm sorry, randomuser.me API, which is used to give you basically just dummy users, just a picture, an avatar. So let's say HTTPS and say randomuser.me /API /portraits /men/32.jpg. All right, so let's just make sure that that showed up. Okay, so we have the image. Now underneath the image, we're going to have a paragraph, and it's going to have a class of lead. I'm also going to give it a class of FST-italic, which will make it italic. And then for the text itself, I'm just going to paste that in, and you can put anything in here. All right, and we want the user's or the testimonial person's name and location. So let's see, let's go under the paragraph, and we'll put this in another paragraph. I'm going to give it a font weight bold, and we'll say Kenny Smith and Portland, Maine. So it should look like that. Now we can take the call MD4, which ends right here, and we can just copy that down 2 more times. And for the second one, let's see, so that's the first one. This is the second one, which I'm going to say woman 32. And the text, I'm just going to replace it, or you can keep the same text, doesn't matter. And this is going to be Lori Mitchell. And she's going to be from Miami, Florida. All right, and then the last one here is going to be men 31. And for the text, and then for the name and location, we're going to do Henry White from Boston, Mass. All right, so now we have our 3 testimonials, and they should stack. Good. Now let's do the download section. So I'll say download section class download, and we're going to have a container and a row, and this one is going to be call, we're going to do call LG 5, so it's going to be 5 and 7 for this, and this will be the image. I'm going to wrap it in image container and also give it in, we're going to do a negative margin here, so we're going to do margin top dash N6, and then I want a margin bottom of 5. Now, this isn't going to work right away, and I'm going to show you why in a second, but let's add the image. We'll give it a class of img-fluid, and the image is going to be in images, and then it's the download ebook. Now, at the moment, the negative margin isn't working. In fact, let's open up the dev tools here, and let's check it out. So just make this a little bigger. So I want to go onto this right here, and you'll see there is no MTN6. What we have to do is enable negative margins, and we do that by just adding a variable to the Bootstrap SCSS file. So right here I'm going to say enable dash negative dash margins, and I'm going to set that to true. And now if I save that, now you can see MTN6 is margin top negative 6 rem. All right, so you have to enable that in the config. So let's finish that section up. We're going to go under the call LG5, which ends right here, and let's add call LG7, and we're going to have a text dash container. We're going to make the text white because it is going to have that blue background image. I'm going to use display dash flex, and I want to make it a flex column. Okay, so it's going to be vertical, and then let's justify content to the center, and we'll make the height 100 of its container, and then MB5. And in here we'll have an H2. I'm going to do font weight dash bold and say get your free ebook now. Under that, we'll have a paragraph, and I'm just going to paste some text in to the paragraph. Okay, now under the paragraph, we're going to have a form. So we don't need an action. We're going to do input group here. So input dash group, and let's do margin bottom 3. And we'll have an input with the class of form dash control. It's going to be, let's make it email. Let's add a placeholder, email address. Okay, and then right under the input, still within the input group, we're going to have a button with BTN and BTN primary, text white, and we're going to say rounded end because we just want the end to have the rounded corners. And inside the button, we'll say download. Now we want the background image, so we're going to go to our styles SCSS, and let's say for the class of download, we're going to add a background image. So URL, and that's going to be up one level into images, and then download background JPEG. And we're going to center that on both axes, and then no repeat. And then just a background size, which is going to be cover. There we go. So it's coming out of this because of that negative margin. If I didn't add this, so if I don't do that, it doesn't go outside of it. So you want to make sure you enable that. So next we're going to do the footer. So we have the social area. So basically this part here, and then the very bottom. So let's go to our HTML, and I'm going to go right under that section that we just finished, and let's say we'll say social because there's kind of two parts to this. So social, so it's going to be a section, class of social, and a class of text-bg-dark because we want the text to be light, padding on the y-axis 6, and overflow hidden, which is just setting overflow to hidden so that we don't have a horizontal scroll bar. All right, and then inside that we'll have a container and a row. And we're going to have a single 6 column, so call MD6. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I want it to be more narrow. So as you can see, it ends here and here. So this is only a 6 column div, but I offset it by 3. That's why it's in the middle. So what we can do is say, in addition to that, offset on medium screens 6. I'm sorry, 3. If we did 6, it would be pushed all the way over to the right. We want it in the middle. And let's see, I'm going to also add to that text center, and I'm going to make the font a little bigger, so we'll do FS4. Okay, and then in that we'll have a paragraph. Just going to paste that text in. Then we're going to have our icons, so underneath that we'll say class, let's call it social icons, like that, or we can spell out icons. And then that's going to be deflex, and we want to justify the content. So justify dash content to center, and we'll add gap dash 4. And then we just want our icons. So this one is going to be FA. The social icons have FAB instead of FAS. Not sure why. That's just what Font Awesome does. Then we're going to do FA Facebook. And I want to make it 2 times the size, so FA-2X. And then we'll copy that down a few times, and we'll do Twitter. We'll do Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. Let's take a look. All right, so the icons aren't centering, And that's because I did that. There we go. So now for the very bottom, we'll say that's the footer. So we'll use a footer tag for this, and I'm going to give it a class of border top because I do want a border on the top. I want it to be the primary color, so we'll say border dash primary. And because we changed that primary variable, this will be that purple color. And then BG is going to be dark, and text will be white, and then PY-4. Okay, and then we'll have a container. We're going to do a row. So the row is going to be, the columns are going to be 8 and 4. So let's say call MD 8. And then we'll have our UL, which is going to have a class of nav. And then each LI will have a class of nav-item. Each link in here will have a class of nav-link. And I'm also going to do link-light for the color. And let's see, this is going to go to details. And we'll say details. And then let's see, actually, the first one is just going to go home. Actually, no. Yeah, let's do home, details, and contact, because those are the pages we have. So this will go index HTML, and then this one will copy down. This one is actually going to go to the contact page that we're going to create, I believe, in the next video. So let's say contact HTML, change that to contact, and then let's see, underneath the call MD8, which ends here, we're going to do a call MD4, and we'll put a paragraph here, and I want this to align to the text end, and we'll just say copyright, and we'll put the copy symbol, so that's going to be ampersand copy semicolon, and blog mastery 2023. Okay, now if I make this smaller, so we could do a couple things here. We could center this. We could center this or align it differently, but what I'm going to do is just not show the copyright on smaller screens. Because remember, we can do that with the display classes. So on the paragraph here, let's add on to this and say D-none, so it'll be display none by default, and then on medium screens, it'll be display block. So now if I save, it looks good because it's not even showing the copyright, but if I make this a little bigger, as soon as we hit medium screens, then it shows up. Okay, so I just try to give you as many examples as I can for different classes. So that's why I do some of the things that I do throughout this course. Even though I may not normally do that, I just want to give you the most exposure to all the classes that I can. So that's pretty much it for the home page. What I want to do next is have a contact page with a form, and we'll just have like a little map image, and then we'll make that function because we're going to deploy to Vercel, and we're going to use a service called FormSpree, which is all absolutely free. Okay, so now we're going to create the contact page, which is going to be a completely separate page, but it's going to have some of the same elements. Obviously, we want the same menu, the same logo. We want the footer, this area here. So what I'm going to do is just copy everything on the index.html and then create a new page called contact.html. And we're going to paste that in, and then let's see, we're going to keep the navigation, obviously, so that we don't really need to change anything. In the header, we're not going to want this big hero image, right? I just want it to be basically just the blue background with the SVG wave, and it'll just say contact or something like that. Contact information. So let's get rid of the... So let's see how we're going to do this. We have the hero. the container. Yeah, let's just get rid of the row here, which ends right here. So we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to create a new row, and we're going to have one column that's going to be, it's going to go all the way across. So we'll do LG12, or we can just do call 12, and we'll have an H1 in here, and we'll say contact information. And then we should be able to just keep the SVG. And then under the header, we're going to get rid of everything up until the footer, the social. So all this stuff, the modals and stuff can all go. Modal 2, the testimonial, form. So up until social. So we'll get rid of that. And let's save, and we'll go to contact, and let's see what that looks like. All right, so I just want to add a little bit of padding right here. I think it's a little too close to the bottom. So on the, let's see, we're going to go back up here to where the header is. And in this div right here, let's add PB4. And that will add a little bit of space under that. Okay, now we want to create the form, which is going to go in the next section. So it's going to go in between the header and social. So let's go right here, and we'll say contact form, section, close that up. We'll say section, it's going to have a class of contact, a class of BG-light, and a class of PB-4. And then we'll have our container, we'll have our row, we'll have a call 12, and then our form, get rid of the action. And then in the form, we're going to have a div with the margin bottom 3, and in that we'll have our input, which will have a class of form control. And let's make it large, so we'll do form control dash LG as well. And we'll put a placeholder and just say name. And we can check that out, all right? And then let's just copy that MB3 div in the input. We'll go on to the next line, and we'll change this to an email type, and let's change the placeholder to email. Actually, one other thing I want to do is add name fields, because when we use form spree, it's going to look at these name fields. So we'll make that one name, and we'll make this one email. And then for the next one, it's going to be a text area. So right under that MB3, we'll create another one, and this one will be a text area. And let's see, we'll keep rows. Let's make rows 6. And we can get rid of calls. We can get rid of ID, but I do want the name to be message. And I do want to add the class of form control and also form control LG, just like the other text inputs. All right, so let's save that. And we'll put a label in it as well. I'm sorry, a placeholder. So placeholder, we'll say message. And there we go. So now we just need a button, and I want it to be a block button. So let's wrap it in D-grid. And then we'll say button, give it a class of btn-primary, and text-white, and then mt5. And we'll say submit, and let's give it a type as well. So we'll say type, not style, type, submit, and we'll check that out. A little too much space, so let's do MT, let's try MT3. Yeah, I think that looks a little better. Okay, so that's the form. Now underneath, I just want to have a map, which it's just going to be an iframe. So let's go under the contact section and say map. And we'll have a section with the class of map and my5. Give it some space on the top and bottom. And then a container. And I know a lot of this stuff can get repetitive, but it's consistent, right? And when you want to add something, it's pretty easy to add. So we're going to do, I don't want it to go all the way, so I'm going to do call 10, but I'm going to offset it 1. So it will still be put in the middle because it'll be 1 on each side, which makes 12. So offset 1. And then H3, we're going to say our location. And then we'll have a paragraph with MB4. And I'm just going to, actually, I just have dummy content for this. So I'll say lorem 30. And then under the paragraph, I'm going to have a class of map, which actually we don't want to do because we have map here. So let's call this map, let's call it location instead, this class. I don't think we're doing it. We're not doing anything with this class. This one we are. We're going to add the sizing. And this is going to be an iframe, so you're definitely going to want to paste this in, copy it from the final project. You're not going to want to type this out. And right now it's going to be too small. So what we want to do is go into, let's see, we're going to go into the style SCSS, and let's go under the download here and add map. And actually let's do map and then iframe. And let's position it left 0. Actually, 1 second here. Yeah, that should be good. So let's do left 0 and top 0, and then height 400 pixels. And the width, I want it to go all the way across the container, so 100%. And we'll say border none. Save it, and there we go. So now we have our map. And the reason that this area is not as wide as the rest is because it's a 10 column div. It's a 10 column, and it has, or I should say a 10 slice column, and it has 1 on each side because I offset it by 1. So hopefully the offsetting makes sense to you. If I had said offset 2, it would take both of the remaining slices and put it in the beginning, and this would be over to the right. Okay, so that's it for the contact page, and that's pretty much it for our little website here. So what I want to do in the next video is get set up to deploy, and we're going to get set up with FormSpree. Okay, so now we're going to get ready to deploy to Vercel, and Vercel is not sponsoring this course in any way. It's just a service that I really like, that I use quite a bit. And they created the Next.js framework, so it's great for Next.js applications, and but it's also great for just regular static websites. So the way that this works is similar to Netlify, if you've ever used them, which is another great service. We basically just push to GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket, and then you can just log into Vercel and you can just select your repository, and it will just deploy. And every time you push to GitHub, it will deploy those new changes. Okay, now the way that we're going to do this, since we're building our CSS from Sass, we can do that on the server because we can have a build command. And what I'm going to do is, we don't even need the CSS. Like, I could delete this, and I could even put it in my git ignore if you don't want to have the CSS folder there, because all you have to do is run npm run sass build. So we could put that there. It's really up to you if you want to or not. And then this command right here is what we want to run on the server, and I'll show you how to do that. So the very first thing is to push to GitHub. So let's go over to GitHub, and let's create a new repository. And I'm just going to call this ebook-website, not ebooky website. And then for description, I'll just say Bootstrap 5 website for selling, not selling, for downloading an ebook. All right, and then I'm going to make this private and create repository. Okay, now you're going to want to initialize a Git repository. Now you can do this in many different ways. You could use the command line, which is what I'm going to do, but you could also use the integrated source control here. So if I click initialize repository, it's the same as me running git init. So I'm just going to run that, and that will create a repository. Now I want to add all my files to the staging area. So I'm going to say git add all. And then I want to commit to the local repository. So I'm going to say git commit -m. And then for a comment, I'll just say initial commit. Okay, so now it's in our local repository. To push it to our remote repository, we have to run these commands here. So we want to just add the remote repo. So we'll do that. And then we want to use the main branch. So I'll paste that in. And then we can push to that main branch. So now that I've done that, if I reload this page, you can see now we have the files in our repository. And I also added this README. You don't have to do that, but just to make it look nice. So we have that on GitHub now. Let's go over to Vercel, and you can sign up with, so there's a hobby, which is free, and then there's Pro, which I believe is $20 a month. If this is going into production, then I would suggest the Pro plan, but if not, you can just use the free plan. Now I'm going to log in, and like I said, you can log in with GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket. We're going to use GitHub. So it'll just authenticate, and then what we want to do from here is create a new project, and then it's going to show you all your GitHub projects. So I want this ebook website. The latest will be the first. So I'll say import. Now, if you're not using SaaS, then you're okay to just deploy. But what I want to do, like I said, is I'm going to go to this build output settings, and I want a build command. So I'm going to choose override, and I'm going to run npm run SaaS :build, because that will create our CSS folder. And then the output directory, I'm going to override that because by default it's going to be public, and I just want it to be the root. So I'm going to put / there. And that should be all I have to do. So now I'm going to click deploy, and it might just take a minute or two. All right, so it says congratulations. It shows this little preview, and if I click on this, it'll take me to my website, which is at ebook-website.vercel.app, which of course you can change that to your own domain name. But yeah, so we have our website, we have our contact page. So I mean, there's not much to really test, but you can see it is working. So now that we've done that, anytime that you make a change, and we will make a change in the next video to implement FormSpree, then you just run git push, and it'll just push to your repository, and then this will just upload with your whatever changes you made. So that's it for deployment. In the next video, we'll go ahead and we'll make this contact form work. So now we're going to make our contact form work, and make sure that you watched the last video because we deployed to Vercel. So now we're going to be using a service called formspree.io. Now, if we look at the plans here, they do have paid plans, and if you expect a lot of submissions, then you definitely want to look into that. For the free plan, you do get 50 monthly submissions for free, which is fine for a small, if you're freelancing or you have a really small agency, that can be, sufficient, 50 submissions per month. But if you want more, you could always look at the paid plans. So what we're going to do here, just get started, go ahead and register. I'm just going to sign in. And then all we have to do is click here to create a form. You can call it what you want. I'll call it ebook website form, and then whatever email you want the submissions to go to. And it's not just an email that you get. You can also log into FormSpree, and you can see all of your submissions right here, actually. And you can see like the stats and stuff. And then to implement it, all you have to do is copy this, your endpoint, and then you just need to add it as the action to your form and make sure it's a post method. And then in your form itself, you can add whatever fields you want. You just want to make sure that you have a name attribute on each one. Now, if you're using like React, there's actually a React component for FormSpree. If you want to do it through JavaScript and HTTP requests and AJAX, you can do it that way. But all we have to do is go to our contact page, go to the form. We're going to add action, and we're going to paste that in. Your endpoint will be different than mine. And then also just add a method of post. And that's it. Now, if I save this and I run git push, sorry, we have to add it. Let's say git add all and git commit m, and we'll say added FormSpree. Okay, and then we can do git push. All right, so if we go to GitHub now and I reload, you can see right here, added FormSpree. And if I go to Vercel, it's not going to be instant. So I'm going to go to my project here, and I'm going to go to deployments, and you can see that it's running. So as soon as you make a push to GitHub, it's as long as it's to the branch that you specified, which in my case is main, then this will just automatically start. So you have a continuous deployment cycle, which is really nice. Now it says ready. So now let's go to our project and go to the contact page. And if I just view the source here, and we look at the form tag, you can see that the action is there. So let's try it out. Let's add something in here, and I'll just say hello world, and I'll just change this because that's the actual email address that it goes to. So I'll say test.com and submit. Okay, so we see a message that says thanks, the form was submitted successfully. We can go back to the page, and you should get an email. So I'm just going to check my email off camera and verify. Yep, so I got an email with the form submission, so you can see that right here. All right, now also if I go to my FormSpree dashboard and I go to submissions, here it is, hello world. And then there's all kinds of plugins you can use. So if you want to integrate Slack, Discord, Stripe, these are all free. And then these other ones are if you're on a paid plan. So MailChimp, MailerLite, if you want this to be a newsletter form. So there's a lot of different things you can do. And again, this is not sponsored by FormSpree or anything like that. It's just a service that I really like and I think is easy to use. Anything that I find that is useful and also very easy to implement, I like to share with you guys. Okay, so now we have our entire website deployed, and we also have it, actually, one second. I think there's, oh, never mind. I thought that wasn't in a container, but it looks good. All right, so that's it, guys. Let's move on to the next project.